Looks good. Looks good.
You see everything?
Yeah, I also have to make this full screen. There we go. Just have to click away down there. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. All right, so everything's moving?
Everything's moving. Perfect. You have the stage.
All right. First of all, thanks for inviting me. This site that I'm going to talk about today is something that is really near and dear to my heart. Joscha is also, of course, pretty familiar with it because it's situated here in northwestern Germany. And this is a project that my coworkers and I have been working on for a couple of years now. And it's only now that we're really slowly but surely trying or starting to understand what this site is actually about. And the special thing is it combines a couple of things you usually wouldn't hear mentioned in the same sentence, as the title picture already implies: caves and dinosaurs. But first of all, I'll give you guys a general introduction to the site. The usual. Where is it? What is it made up of? How do we work there? And first of all, again, the site is situated here in northwestern Germany. You can see to the right here where it is approximately. And the interesting thing is the Balve site isn't really connected to any broad lower Cretaceous stratum. In fact, it's situated right in the middle of Devonian limestone. And that is because this is a fissure fill. So we have Devonian limestone that has been karstified in the roughly, at least at this point, we think, late Jurassic to early Cretaceous. And most likely responsible for this is hydrothermal activity. This is due to the presence of hydrothermal minerals in the area. And the Balve site isn't even the only site of this kind. We actually have another site situated in Brilon-Neden, which is roughly contemporaneous in age, but the fossil contents are different. David Norman actually described the fauna from Brilon-Neden in the 1980s, but the Brilon-Neden fauna mostly consists of Mantellosaurus and Iguanodon, while Balve gives us a far more complete picture of the fauna from the lower Cretaceous. And to the left here, you can see roughly what people interpreted this site to look like a couple of years ago. It's really just, or we used to think that it's just a fissure fill. And this is what the site actually looks like. Again, it's lower Cretaceous in age, so Barremian to Aptian roughly. It's been dated by pollen analysis. And the lucky thing for us actually is that the clay there isn't really consolidated. Most likely, this clay just never received the pressure necessary to create limestone because it was just laying in that fissure. So therefore, we can actually still apply water to that clay, and the clay will readily take up that water. So it softens up again. That makes screen washing a lot more efficient and a lot more easy because we don't have to use acids or something to dissolve the rock. That still doesn't mean that it's super easy because the Balve site contains isolated broken bits of bone, so it's still a lot of work. We really go through dozens of tons of material every year just to find the things that I'm going to show you right now. But first of all, a quick stop, because why is Balve so extremely special? And why is this something that we invest so much time in? And that is actually a question that is kind of complicated to answer because it's due to many different factors. First of all, the Barremian and Aptian is a very interesting time in terms of paleogeography. This is a time of a very low sea level for Mesozoic times, which means that we had a lot of land bridges present. Especially for Europe, that's kind of unusual for the Mesozoic, as many of you will know, because for the most part, this is an island chain during the Mesozoic. But during this time, especially in Western Europe, you have a lot of interconnectivity between these different little land tips that look out of the sea. And this, of course, means that the fauna is, at least in theory, far much more homogenized than it would usually be. And the second aspect is, which has really only been found in the last couple of years, that this was likely an upland environment, likely at least 100 meters above sea level. Also, the next coastline would have been, like, we estimate, at least some 100 kilometers away from the site. And this is, of course, pretty unusual because, as many of you will know, for the most part, in the fossil record, in the rock record, we get deposits from fluvial systems, lakes, marine systems, but having truly inlandic deposits is kind of rare. And the last thing, again, that's also something that has really only been found out the last couple of years, is that this was likely some sort of a cave in the Cretaceous. And for this, I would like to refer you to this paper, because this is really an argument that is very complex. There is a lot of different reasons why we think that this was likely a cave back in the day, and it's due to water flow patterns back in the time in the underground. It's due to the karstification patterns we see. It's due to the nature of the quarry walls that we have, because they kind of resemble what you find in caves today. It's due to the structuring of the sediments, but for the most part, it's due to this paper going at lengths to reconstruct the way that all of these crevices were formed in the region back in the day. So, and of course, this gives us the unique opportunity to find out what kind of differences might have been present between your more coastal faunas and these upland faunas. It also gives us the opportunity to check up on if these animals here in Germany were actually kind of similar to the other Western European animals back in the day. And this is what we have in terms of microfossils. This is just a very rough overview of everything we have. Of course, we have tons of fish. So if anybody would like to work on a Lower Cretaceous fish fauna, you're welcome to join us, because we really need someone for the fish. We, of course, have chondrichthyes, including Hybodontiformes, and we have an incredible mammal fauna. This is actually one of the few sites where the mammals have been described before the dinosaurs, or at least properly been described before the dinosaur remains, because Achim Schwermann, the main responsible person for this excavation, he is a mammal researcher. And we have some really remarkable finds. For example, the first Central European spalacotherids, or the youngest European dryelastids. So this is really special, and we look at things like the salamanders, the turtles we have there. They show definite affinities to other faunas from Europe. For example, the turtle Heliochelydra nopce is far more widespread in Europe at the time, and the salamander Balve herpeton, actually named after this locality, actually has its closest relatives in the so-called Wealden, quote-unquote, Wealden fauna. This is also something we see in the dinosaurs. By far, most dinosaur remains are referable to Iguanodon, and of course, Iguanodontids, at least, they are extremely widespread, especially in Europe at the time. And we also, since 2023, know about titanosaurs. And titanosaurs, of course, as most of you will know, are also pretty widespread. They're everywhere. They're in France, England, Spain. You pretty much get them everywhere. But now I will show you what we are actually working on. This is the part that people tend to either passionately love or passionately hate. It's the non-avian theropods. And we actually have some fairly recent developments when it comes to this project. This is what Darius, Renee, and me started a couple of years ago. And one of the first really interesting developments was that we found out that we have ornithomimosaur remains on site. We talked about this at the EAVP conference 2 years ago. I just recently gave a talk on that topic again at a German paleo meeting. And this is what we have. It might not look like much, but actually, this material we think is relatively confidently referable to ornithomimosaurs. The metatarsal we found, for instance, I really first noticed it due to its very pronounced triangular shape. The shaft has a triangular shape to it. And this is something we associate with the so-called arctometatarsal. The arctometatarsal is, of course, a triangular kind of third metatarsal in dinosaurs, which means that it's kind of pinched between the inner and the outer metatarsal, kind of rotating the inner and outer toes apart. And it also acts like a kind of spring mechanism. So if the animal puts its foot down, the other two metatarsals kind of slide onto the third metatarsal, and it acts like a spring. As soon as you lift the foot, you get some energy back from the step you just took. And luckily for us, there's a couple of theropod dinosaurs which actually have this arctometatarsal. And one of those groups, one of the most famous groups, of course, is Tyrannosaurids. But when it comes to Tyrannosaurids, we actually asked ourselves the question, is this even feasible? Because this is a really limited group when it comes to their stratigraphic and geographic distribution. They're really mostly limited to the late Cretaceous of North America and Asia, and so they are pretty much unlikely to be present in Balve. And again, we have to ask the question, could it maybe be a troodontid? And for troodontids, at least for those we found in the literature, in distal view, their third metatarsals, they seem to be much more quadrangular, while our metatarsal is way broader than in the troodontids I saw. And troodontids, they also lack this sinusoidal shape the shaft has in the distal part in our specimen. So therefore, we don't think it's a troodontid. Troodontids also only really appear in Europe in the fossil record in the late Cretaceous, and they're extremely rare even then. Which leads us to the next contenders, which are alvarezsaurs. And alvarezsaurs, again, they show a difference from our specimen, which is that they consistently have a straight shaft. I didn't find a single example of an alvarezsaur having a sinusoidal shaft, as our specimen has. And again, alvarezsaurs also really only appear in the late Cretaceous within Europe. Previously, we don't have anything. Could it then maybe be an oviraptorosaur? And with oviraptorosaurs, it's really kind of complicated because a lot of oviraptorosaurs from the early Cretaceous are two-dimensionally preserved, which of course makes it kind of difficult to really assess the anatomy of their metatarsals. But for the most part, what we found, they tend to look slightly different. We're going to expand upon that in the paper. And we could at least exclude cenagnathids, because cenagnathids, which you can see to the top right here, they have this cruciate pattern to their to the plantar side of their third metatarsals. And we only have one ridge in our specimen. So kind of unlikely that it's any kind of early cenagnatid. And with oviraptorosaurs, additionally, we have to keep in mind that they are unknown for Europe. If anybody of you knows about anything, of course, I'd love to hear. But as far as I know, we don't have any unequivocal oviraptorosaurs from Europe at all. Thecosoluris from the Wealden was once considered to maybe be an oviraptorosaur, but by now it's been identified as a therizinosaur as well, as an ornithomimosaur, as an abelosauroid, so no unequivocal evidence for oviraptorosaurs. And this leaves us with ornithomimosaurs, and quite curiously, we actually found that quite derived ornithomimosaurs are the best match for this metatarsal. You can see, for instance, in Ornithomimus even, you can see this slightly sinusoidal shape, a very broad extensor fossa, and this concave dorsal surface to the metatarsal. And the distal articular surface is also extremely similar, being wide. and overall just extremely similar in shape. So, of course, we also have them. We have ornithomimosaurs from Europe. We have them from the lower Cretaceous even, because Pelecanamimos has been described in the late 90s, which unfortunately lacks hind limb elements, so we cannot really compare our specimen to Pelecanamimos. But what we can compare to Pelecanamimos is this manual ungule. And this is, we think, really a very convincing case for an ornithomimosaur on the Balve side, because this ungule really closely matches Pelecanamimos. We also found extremely similar manual ungules in most ornithomimosaurs. And a common pattern to ornithomimosaurs is that the third manual ungule is extremely straight and flat and narrow. So this is exactly what we see here. Therefore, we can quite confidently say that ornithomimosaurs must have been around Balve, at least some of them. And we have hopes of reassessing this in the future with more material. And this leads me to the really juicy part of this talk. I would like you not to take any pictures of this because this is really work in progress. I would still like to show it to you guys, also because I just presented it at another conference. So I'm willing to share it, but please do not share this around everywhere. What is a quadrate? The quadrate is, of course, the bone from the skull of a vertebrate which the lower jaw connects to. And this is the Balve quadrates in their ventral view, so you can have a look at the articular surface. And luckily, there is a methodology how you can analyze these articular surfaces, which is quadrate morphometrics, which has been developed by Hendricks et al. In 2013. This is a landmark-based analysis, so basically all you have to know is that you basically mark different points around these two condyles so that it characterizes the articular surface. And then a so-called PCA analysis can find out which taxon of theropod dinosaur this quadrate is actually closest to. And this is the results for both of them. The one marked with the red arrows here, this one we presented at EAVP 2023 already. This is the smaller of the two, which actually plots extremely close to Eotyrannus in PC1 and 2 and PC2 and 3. And just to make sure that this wasn't a mistake, we actually rescored the holotype of Eotyrannus langi manually. And as you can see, all of them plot extremely closely together, which makes us really, really certain that we have some close relative, at least, of Eotyrannus around at the Balve site. And whoops, the second quadrate is a very curious case. He recently started to work on this specimen, and in PC1 and 2, it comes out as an allosaurioid, but in PC3 and 4, it comes out as a megalosauroid. So it's not really a very unequivocal result, but still, most likely, this method suggested that it's an allosauroid. But the curious thing about this quadrate now is that in terms of its general morphology, it doesn't really resemble an allosauroid. It lacks pneumatic structures, which should normally be present in many allosaurs, especially Carcharodontosaurs. It lacks a large quadrate foramen, so all you really need to know is this thing is not really too similar to allosauroids, despite the morphometric analysis suggesting so. We also know that it's completely apneumatic, so there's no cavities inside of this quadrate, which, again, should be present in allosauroids. So stay tuned, because we're still working on that. I am not going to put any sort of label on that thing, but it could potentially be something extremely interesting. And this is what we can say so far. again, this comes back to this just being a very special time from a Central and Western European perspective, because we have apparently a lot of faunal exchange. Now we can also prove it for the theropod dinosaurs. So, a growing dinosaur fauna from an upland environment in northwestern Germany. We now know about titanosaurs, iguanodontians. We now know about small ornitholimosaurs, at least close relative of Eotyrannus, and something different. And future work is also going to concern a lot of isolated teeth that we have from this site. There is, of course, also this methodology by Hendricks, which involves phylogenetic and morphometric analyses, as well as a machine learning approach. And this is what we actually started work on just this week. So stay tuned. There's a lot more going to be revealed about this site in the future. And I hope that we can share some of these results quite soon, because, again, it's a really incredibly special place, and a lot of questions have yet to be answered. And this leads me to my final slide, and I am open to any questions. Thanks.